I remember our first dinner in the new suburban house like it was yesterday. The sun had just set, shadows stretching across the quiet street, while a lawnmower hummed somewhere down the block. Dad carried boxes into the kitchen as Mom set the table with our old dishes. I felt a strange mix of excitement and unease, like the house was alive, settling in ways we weren't meant to notice. The floor creaked under our feet, and from upstairs came a faint scraping, like a chair slowly dragged across the floor. I told myself it was normal, but the rhythm was too deliberate. Mom laughed softly, but her smile looked forced. We sat down to eat, the clinking of silverware echoing through the empty halls. My little sister stared at the ceiling, chewing slowly. The scraping sound continued, steady, purposeful, from the dark hallway above. I tried focusing on my plate, but my nerves wouldn't settle. My fork scraped against the dish as my eyes kept drifting back to the staircase, waiting for something, anything, to move. Dad tried to make conversation, asking about school and work, but his voice felt distant, like he was speaking from another room. Every few moments, a floorboard creaked upstairs, heavier each time, like slow, deliberate pacing. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Mom's eyes flicked toward the stairs once, her brow tightening, but she said nothing. The silence between us stretched longer than the scraping above. Then, the chandelier swayed slightly, though the windows were closed and the air was still. The scraping returned, faster now, like it was moving closer. My sister whispered, "Do you hear that?" But I only shook my head, pretending I didn't. Dad laughed suddenly, forcing the sound out, but it echoed strangely, as if the walls swallowed it and sent it back, distorted. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch and breathe, bending in slow, unnatural waves. I tried to focus on my fork, my food, anything, ordinary, but the sound returned in patterns too deliberate to ignore. Every pause made my heart stop, waiting for the next drag of wood on wood. My sister's hands trembled as she held her napkin tight, refusing to look upstairs. When I reached for my glass, the water inside shimmered oddly, vibrating just slightly, though no one else moved. The scraping stopped for a moment, replaced by soft thumps, slow, heavy footsteps pacing just above us. I wanted to believe it was the house settling, but the rhythm was too precise, too human. Mom finally murmured, "It's just the house," though her voice cracked halfway through, betraying her doubt. Thought I saw movement then, a flicker of shadow gliding along the upstairs wall, gone before I could blink. Dad's words turned into meaningless background noise, lost to the heavy silence pressing in. The room felt smaller, air thicker, each breath harder to take. The sense of being watched was constant now, pressing down from the ceiling. By the time we finished dinner, the sound had stopped, leaving behind a silence so complete it hurt my ears. I stared at the staircase, half expecting to see a figure standing there, watching us from the dark. My sister refused dessert, clinging to Mom's arm as we cleared the plates, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Even now, the memory of that first dinner in our new home still makes my skin crawl. After dinner, we tried to relax in the living room, pretending everything was fine, but the feeling followed us, heavy and unrelenting. The freshly painted walls seemed too smooth, almost reflective, bouncing the faint yellow glow of the hallway light back at us. My sister wouldn't leave Mom's side, whispering that she heard someone upstairs. Dad ignored her, flipping through TV channels, but even the voices on the screen sounded hollow, like they were coming from underwater. I couldn't stop glancing at the staircase. Every creak sounded closer, more purposeful, like each step was chosen to draw our attention. Mom told us to settle down, her voice tight, a poor disguise for her nerves. The shadows grew longer, stretching at impossible angles. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something move, a shape slipping out from the stairwell, but when I turned, it was gone. The air thickened around us, heavy with waiting. My sister's voice trembled as she whispered, "He's up there," pointing to the ceiling. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, unable to answer. Dad tried changing the subject, forcing his voice into casual tones, asking about weekend plans, but every word fell flat. The house didn't care about small talk. The soft thumping began again upstairs, now paired with that slow, dragging sound. My pulse quickened. I gripped the armrest of the sofa, muscles tense, trying to listen through the pounding of my own heart. Mom's eyes darted toward the stairs, then away, refusing to meet what she already knew. The room seemed to shrink around us, shadows pulling closer, corners darkening as if light itself was retreating. My breathing grew louder in my ears until I realized it wasn't just me, it was everyone. No one dared to speak. My sister's hand found mine, her nails digging into my skin. I didn't pull away. Something about the way the hallway light bent made it look like a shape was crouched at the top of the stairs, staring down. I blinked hard and it was gone. But the air didn't change. It still felt occupied. I told myself it was just the house, new floors, weird acoustics, but the scraping returned. Slow, steady, far too deliberate to be random. But it wasn't the sound of old wood, it was the sound of intent. It was as if something was waiting, testing us, trying to see how long it could push before we broke. Mom's lips moved silently, a whisper of prayer maybe, too soft to hear. Suddenly, a chair scraped violently across the floor above us, the sound sharp and heavy. My sister screamed, burying her face in Mom's shoulder. Dad flinched, his forced calm shattering as he stammered, It's nothing, just the house." But his eyes said otherwise. I knew it too. The sound had a pattern, a rhythm that didn't belong to any settling foundation. It was someone moving. Slowly. On purpose. My palms were slick. My knees locked in place, but no one moved. The chandelier's light flickered and the shadows stretched farther, almost touching the ceiling corners. I couldn't shake the certainty that the hallway above wasn't empty. By the time Dad finally stood up to check, the air had thickened like fog. Each breath felt weighted. The staircase looked normal at first, but I could feel my stomach twist with every step. My sister clung to Mom's arm, refusing to go first, whispering that she didn't want to see him. Even as we reached the top, the hallway looked harmless, washed in dull yellow light, quiet, still. But it was colder up there, unnaturally so. The air carried a faint metallic tang, like rust or blood, sharp enough to sting my throat. My sister pressed her face into Mom's sleeve, whispering that someone was standing beyond the last door. Dad hesitated at the knob, his hand trembling before he caught himself. The scraping began again, lighter this time, almost playful, weaving from one end of the hall to the other. I froze, counting the rhythm without meaning to. It was too intentional to be random, almost like it wanted us to follow. Shadows along the walls stretched longer, flickering like something alive. Mom muttered softly, words I couldn't catch. Maybe a prayer, maybe disbelief. The hallway seemed to bend slightly in the distance, an illusion that made it feel endless. My sister trembled harder, her fear crawling into my chest. Every instinct screamed to go back downstairs, but something, curiosity or dread, kept me moving forward. At the end of the hall, one door stood slightly open. We hadn't touched it before. From inside came that same rhythmic scraping. Low and steady, Dad finally pushed the door, and it creaked open to reveal an empty room. No one there, just air. Thick, cold, wrong. I stepped closer, my breath fogging in front of me. The window reflected the hallway behind us, and for a brief second I saw a figure standing where we had just been. I blinked, and it vanished, leaving only our pale faces staring back. My sister whimpered, pointing toward the corner. Nothing moved, yet the darkness there felt dense, almost shaped. I told myself it was imagination, nerves, exhaustion, but the air buzzed faintly, vibrating like the house itself was alive. Dad forced a smile, pretending calm, but I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the doorknob. The scraping stopped once more. Silence fell so thick it felt physical, pressing against my ears. Mom guided us back toward the stairs, her hand clamped around my sister's. Each step down groaned louder, echoing through the empty hall. When we reached the bottom, the air felt lighter, but not safe. Even the familiar glow of the dining room light couldn't push away the sense that something was still watching. We cleared the dishes without a word, the sound of clinking plates echoing too loudly in the quiet house. The scraping didn't return that night, but every so often, when the house was still and the lights were low, I'd hear it again. Soft, deliberate, pacing above us, and sometimes, late at night, when I looked up the staircase, I swore I saw the faint outline of a shadow waiting at the top as if it had never left. I knew that first night the house wasn't empty, and it never really felt like it belonged to us. Even now, years later, I can still hear that sound, the slow drag of a chair across the upstairs floor, echoing somewhere deep in my memory. The neighborhood was supposed to be peaceful, quiet, safe, but after that night, every small noise carried a different weight. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind against the window, felt like a reminder that something unseen still lived there. I'd never found out what it was or why it stayed. Maybe some places just hold on to things, memories, energy, or people who never really left. The evening sun stretched long shadows across the backyard as I helped Mom carry dishes to the dining room. Our house on Maplewood Drive was quiet, tucked between rows of identical homes, but that calm always felt fragile. Grandma sat at the table, humming softly as she polished her glasses. Her warm smile filled the room, yet something about it made me uneasy. The table was set with our best dishes, silverware catching the last light of day. As we sat down, Grandma began talking about spirits that lingered near familiar places, speaking like she'd met them herself. My little sister leaned closer to Mom, wide-eyed. Outside, the rustling leaves pressed against the window, and every clink of silverware echoed too loudly in the quiet room. Halfway through the meal, the salt shaker wobbled slightly on the table, though no one had touched it. My sister gasped softly, eyes darting to mine, and I felt my heartbeat jump. Grandma kept talking, her voice calm and steady, either unaware or choosing not to notice. Every time my dad laughed, the sound came out hollow, swallowed by something invisible in the room. A faint draft slipped through the open window, stirring the napkins and making the curtains sway, and the shadows along the wall moved with them in slow, unnatural patterns. The silverware tilted toward the center of the table, too neatly to be coincidence. Mom frowned, her gaze lingering on the corner of the room, as if she sensed something we couldn't see. My sister whispered, "It's moving again." I felt a chill crawl down my back. Even the warm aroma of food had turned heavy, almost suffocating. Grandma's voice grew softer, more vivid, as she told us about spirits that sometimes sat at dinner tables, unseen but listening. I tried to focus on my plate, but every small sound, every motion of the tablecloth pulled my attention back. The walls of our quiet suburban home suddenly felt strange, as if they were breathing, holding their own secrets. Dad tried to change the subject, asking about school and work, but his words faded under the hum of the house. The water in our glasses rippled once, disturbed by something unseen. Shadows stretched longer along the walls, bending slightly toward us. Even the small things, the napkin, a fork, the salt shaker, seemed alive with quiet intent. Then I heard it. A whisper, so faint it might have been the echo of Grandma's words repeating themselves. My sister's hand found mine under the table, her fingers cold and tight. The movements on the table followed a rhythm now, slow and deliberate, traveling from one end to the other. Grandma kept talking as if she didn't notice, her calm tone clashing with the thick tension crawling through the room. By the time dinner ended, the objects stilled, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. The shadows stayed where they were, stubborn, curling in the corners as if watching. Grandma's stories lingered in the air, uneasy and real. Even now, I can remember that silence, the weight of invisible eyes fixed on us. After clearing the dishes, we lingered longer than we should have. Grandma kept speaking softly about spirits who liked quiet corners, her words blending with the faint hum of the chandelier above. The sunlight had vanished completely, leaving the dining room glowing in artificial light that flickered every so often. I reached for my fork and froze. It had shifted on its own, sliding just a few inches toward the table's edge. My sister gasped. "It moved again," she whispered, trembling. Dad forced a laugh, brushing it off, but his smile didn't touch his eyes. Every ordinary sound, the fridge's hum, the creak of chair legs, sounded louder, sharper, almost staged. The shadows on the walls bent oddly, stretching where no light reached. Grandma went on with her story, speaking of spirits that mimic familiar sounds, that stay near families they once loved. A glass near Mom's plate rattled gently, enough to make her flinch. My sister's grip tightened around my fingers, her hand shook uncontrollably. The air thickened, pressing down on us, and even breathing felt difficult. The clinking of utensils came again, this time in small, perfect patterns that echoed our own voices. Grandma smiled faintly as though she expected it. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, trying to stay calm, but the fear in their eyes betrayed them. The chandelier's glow warped slightly, making the wallpaper appear to ripple. The air carried a sudden chill that didn't belong in a heated room, and the shadows on the walls began to lean toward the table, as if drawn to it. My sister whispered, "I feel him." Her words barely left her lips, but I felt the truth in them. The plates and glasses looked slightly off, tilted in ways I couldn't explain. Grandma's voice continued, steady and calm, cutting through the unease like a thread holding the moment together. Then, without warning, a small stack of napkins slid across the table, stopping just short of the edge. Dad leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his voice too calm when he said, "It's just air." But even he didn't believe it. The tension in the room was almost physical, vibrating in the air. My sister's breathing was shallow. Every inhale seemed to echo. Mom tried to distract us by collecting plates, but each time she looked away, something else shifted. The silverware tilted again, all pointing toward the center of the table. A glass by Dad's hand trembled, teetering without falling. The shadows around the room swayed independently of the light, moving on their own. Grandma kept her voice calm, but there was something behind it now. A small tremor, a knowing. I caught it in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, like she had seen this before. The whispering returned, faint and rhythmic, repeating her words almost perfectly. My sister gripped my hand tighter, nails digging in, and I realized she was silently crying. The air pulsed, pressing against us as though the room itself had come alive. Every object, plates, glasses, forks, the simple salt shaker, now seemed deliberate, charged with purpose. When we finally stood to leave the table, everything went still again. The movement stopped, but the silence didn't feel peaceful, it felt watchful. Shadows clung to the corners, coiled tightly as if refusing to leave. Grandma's story hovered in the air, her final words sinking deep into the quiet. We moved slowly, almost afraid to make noise. Even Dad hesitated before turning off the light. The moment he did, a soft sound echoed like silverware brushing across porcelain, and we all froze. No one said a word. We just left the room pretending not to hear it. But I did. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the faint scrape of that salt shaker shifting on its own, as if something at that table was still trying to finish dinner. Even now, years later, that dinner still brings the same quiet dread, as if the table remembers everything. Sometimes I think about going back to that house, standing in the dining room to see if the shadows would move again. Every object looked ordinary, yet carried a strange weight, like it was aware of us. My sister still talks about that night, eyes wide, recalling how the silverware moved on its own. None of us have ever sat at that table the same way again. Even in silence, I can still feel it. The pressure of that evening. Something unseen, patient, watching. The shadows in my memory feel longer, every reflection sharper, every sound slightly distorted. Grandma's calm voice is the only part that feels real, though the unease never left. That dinner became a memory that refuses to fade. We'd been best friends since middle school, and I still remember that quiet Friday night when he came over for dinner. The sun had just slipped behind the row of suburban houses, the street glowing orange in the fading light. Mom set the table, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air while the dishwasher hummed softly. Everything felt normal until it didn't. It had been a while since we'd had guests, so the house felt alive again with laughter. My friend sat across from me, his phone face down beside his plate. We talked about work and old classmates, just like always, until his smile froze mid-sentence. His eyes drifted past my shoulder, focused on something behind me. When I asked what was wrong, he forced a smile and shook his head. But the air around the table had already changed. Quiet, tense, and heavy. I could feel his eyes flick toward that same spot behind me more than once, like he was watching someone quietly standing there. The conversation started to lose its rhythm, each pause lasting a little too long. Mom got up to grab dessert, leaving just the two of us at the table. The silence wasn't exactly uncomfortable. It was strange. Off. He looked past me again, nodding faintly, like someone had just spoken to him. I turned to glance over my shoulder, but there was only the glass door reflecting the kitchen light. When I looked back, he quickly changed the subject, asking about my new job, his voice tight and forced. I told myself he was tired, but I couldn't shake the sense that something unseen was standing right behind me. The air felt cooler against the back of my neck, and I rubbed it without thinking. Then Mom came back, placing the dessert tray down, and that seemed to break whatever uneasy spell it formed. My friend smiled again, maybe too quickly, and leaned back in his chair. I convinced myself I was imagining things. Just stress, a long week, nothing more. Still, when his eyes darted again to that same spot behind me, my stomach twisted. Mom served apple pie and coffee, the perfect ending to a calm night, but he barely touched his plate. His focus stayed fixed somewhere past my shoulder. Mom asked if he was okay, and he gave a quick laugh, but it sounded thin. Then it happened again. His gaze shifted sharply, deliberate this time, as if he heard something whisper. I joked nervously, asking if he was seeing ghosts behind me. He didn't laugh. His face stiffened, and his eyes met mine for just a second before drifting back over my shoulder. "I'll tell you later," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. The way he said it made the air in the room feel heavier. When dinner ended, I couldn't stop replaying the way he kept looking behind me, like someone had been sitting there the entire time. Afterward, we moved to the living room while Mom loaded the dishwasher. The TV murmured softly, its glow flickering over the family photos on the wall. My friend sat on the couch beside me but stayed quiet, his eyes shifting toward the dining room every few seconds. When I asked what was wrong, he just said, "Nothing," but the way he said it told me everything. I tried to talk about something else, but he barely reacted. His eyes were locked on the darkened dining room, where the chandelier swayed gently as if someone had brushed past it. The air around us felt charged, like the whole house was listening. He rubbed the back of his neck, whispering, "You really don't see her, do you?" The words froze me. My voice cracked when I asked, "See who?" He didn't answer. He just stared at my empty chair at the dinner table, eyes wide. The TV light flickered across his face as his lips parted, but no words came out. Then I realized I hadn't heard Mom in a while. The kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. I called out to her, but no one answered. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator broke the silence. My friend stood slowly, never taking his eyes off that same spot near the table. "She was standing right there while we ate," he whispered. "She kept looking at you." My pulse pounded as I turned toward the dining room. It was empty. But the chandelier swayed again, this time with no movement, no wind. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My friend stepped back, pale, his eyes following something invisible. The reflection in the glass door shimmered slightly, as though someone had passed between the lights. For a moment, everything stopped, the hum of the fridge, the clocks ticking, even my breathing. Then he whispered, "She's gone now." He sank back onto the couch, his voice trembling with confusion, caught between fear and relief. I stayed frozen, staring at the faint reflection of that empty chair. When Mom finally came back from the hallway, I nearly jumped. She looked at us, puzzled, asking why we were so quiet. My friend forced a smile, mumbling something about being tired. I tried to act normal, but my chest felt tight, my heart beat too loud. Mom offered him leftovers, but he shook his head, already halfway to the door. His hand trembled as he reached for his shoes, eyes avoiding mine. Before leaving, he turned to me and said quietly, "If you see her again, don't talk to her." Then he walked out, leaving the front door slightly open, the cool night air creeping in. When I turned back toward the dining room, the chandelier had stopped swaying. But one chair was pulled out farther than before. It hadn't been like that earlier. I stood there, frozen, staring at it, trying to convince myself it was just the draft. But I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the click of the heater, even my own breathing. Each time I checked, that chair was still pulled out, no matter how many times I pushed it back in. Around midnight, I heard faint whispering near the kitchen. Soft but close, like someone murmuring right behind the wall. I told myself it was nothing, just the pipes or the wind. Still, I got up to check. The kitchen felt colder than the rest of the house, the air heavy and still. The clock ticked loudly above the fridge, each second echoing in my chest. When I looked toward the dining area, that same chair was pulled out again, just slightly, angled toward me. I froze. I could hear its quiet, steady breathing coming from that direction. I turned on the light, but somehow that made it worse. The brightness carved deep shadows under the table, dark shapes that didn't quite match the furniture. The other chairs were still, but that one seemed to have shifted, turned as if facing me. My pulse raced. My hands trembled against the counter as I whispered to myself that I was imagining it, that it couldn't be real. I went back to my room and shut the door, forcing myself to lie down. But just as I started to drift off, I heard it, his voice. My best friend's voice, faint and muffled, coming from the dining room. "She's behind you," he whispered, exactly the way he had said it earlier. My blood ran cold. I sat up, staring into the dark hallway. The light outside my door flickered once, then went out. I didn't move. The whispering came again, closer this time, like someone standing just on the other side of the door. The floor creaked softly, slow, deliberate steps circling the table. Then, silence, no breathing, no movement, nothing. I lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the thin line of light beneath my door, waiting for it to change. When morning finally came, the silence in the house felt heavier than any sound I could imagine. The next morning, I asked Mom if she'd been in the kitchen. She said no. The table was untouched except for that one chair, still pulled out, facing my seat. She pushed it in and went on like nothing happened. I never told her. My friend never spoke about that night again. A week later, he moved away, saying the house felt wrong. I still live here. I avoid the dining room after dark. Some nights I hear his voice again, soft, distant, calling from that same room. Other times, I can feel someone behind me, waiting,